Thank you everyone, and welcome back to Ollie. For those of you who've been here before, and you know this is going to be a year of medieval England. You say, well, I thought it was just the one term. No, that's just opening it up. We'll just get barely through the Anglo-Saxons. You say, wow, I thought that would be a day or two, and then we could move into real history with the Battle of Hastings and get to Normans. Oh no, you'll have to wait for 2017 for that. Yes. But I sense there's a lot of Anglophilia in this room, so I don't think I'm going to have any trouble with you folks at all, because there is so much to enjoy and love in British history and every particular section that I think that whatever section we do, which will include the spring of 2017, and we're going to get all the way to the unification of England and Scotland. So that's major for me. Now, after that, I consider to be modern, so I don't do anything like that. But Queen Anne is just like yesterday's newspaper for me. So, yeah, we'll let it go there. We keep this back in the good old days, very literally. As we go forward, I might note, however, that I will be calling upon our great Ollie friend Carol Darren, who is she loves Latin, the Latin language, even more than I do. Did many of you have to take it in school? Oh, this is wonderful. Just, you were all the potentials for translations. We can do them if you would like to do that. In addition to trivia, you can have translation night, and we can do that if you still remember all your conjugations and declensions, because there's a lot of Latin in this particular period, since we are going to Roman Britain. So let us begin by noting some interesting, or at least I thought so, facts about the particular area of Britain with which we are concerned. 75 miles. Have you ever thought about that? That it's that close everywhere. It's not always a beautiful view from the sea, but it quite often is, and it is a presence in their lives. And I think that's an important characteristic as we prepare for the coming of the Romans, and we make ourselves aware of that. They do have that maritime quality about them. Let's remember the role of the British Navy in the history of Britain, and how ever present they are of being an island, entire and separate unto themselves. For those of you modernists and who are following the Brexit controversy and realize we still have the pound and not the euro, I think enough is said, right? That they are definitely going to stay their own way. In the southern part, we have sun. We have people. We have a lot of development. I like to say to people, when we talk about the North, we are really talking about a later period, such as the Industrial Revolution. Most of my period, it's sheep and a very, very few folks. I mean, it's just not a lot going on up there, except the ban of the sheep. It's just not fertile, and it lacks the weather. I always say, you know, when you're up north, and I know many of you have had that feeling, if you've seen the sun before 12 o'clock, it's been a good day. because you are not going to see it again, because it's gone. And if you get depressed because of the weather, stay away. Stay in the South. I mean, it's all beautiful, but you need to be in Florida, not Northern England, right? So, all of this then is to say that it appeared in ancient times that the natural resources were in the South. So that's where the people are. Because without the natural resources, you're not going to eat every day. There's just nothing else about it. There is no other way to make it. So, with that said then, Celtic Britain has been imagined in this particular way. What you see there are the various tribes occupying the areas that I must say are guesstimated by archaeologists. Archaeologists are our friends. We are not archaeologists because historians deal traditionally with the written word. Archaeologists have a lot more, I would say, latitude in terms of estimating. And by the way, as I make that statement, you'll notice that this is the 5th edition of this book that I recommended. The 6th edition, which now is up to, I think, $150. How much? 160, gone. Well, if you don't find a used model, you can get bargains galore. And you say, what's the difference? Probably a sentence or two in the first section, because the archaeologists, they change their minds. It's all fashion, what's in fashion this year. So that's what's going on. There's a lot of shifting in terms of what people think about Celtic Britain. Because it's not based, you see, on the written word. It's based on various kinds of physical findings and what these archaeologists make of it. Fascinating stuff, I must add. Now, these archaeologists, as noted, believe that human beings have been in the British Isle for a very long time indeed. That does not mean that we know a lot about what they were doing for all that time. It's simply that they existed. And of course, all of us who are tourists can't get enough of Stonehenge. Yes, I, for many years, took students to England every summer. And I would announce before we got to Stonehenge, I would say, now, you're excited now, and when you see it, I want you to continue to be excited. And you will act interested throughout the guide's explanation. You will not go to the souvenir shop until the guide finishes. Yeah. There is a problem sometimes in the building up of interest in Stonehenge, which has been highly debated, as I'm sure you are aware, as to what its purpose was, whether religious, whether astronomical, or what it might have been. I thought that was a nice shot. But even with all the beautiful sunset, I'm not sure that that tells us anything more about what it all means. Again, when you read the 4th edition of the book, or the 5th edition, or the 6th edition, you can get all the different opinions, but in the end, there is absolutely no certainty. But I can tell you, if you're looking for a good time, try it out at Halloween. They say there are some pretty interesting people who gather at Stonehenge about that time. The scary folks. So, personally, I'd be in my hotel. But it is very, very lovely down there. And of course, I love that Salisbury Cathedral. I think that's more interesting. These Celtic peoples, of course, include the group we know as the Druids. And the Druids are famous, and they are so pointed out as the elite of the Celts. Much of this information is not speculative because it's like Western writings. I don't know why, but I just had the feeling of Jesuits writing from Africa or Asia about some of the interesting cultures they work with. And it's the same way with the Romans. The Romans are like reporting on the various cultures they encounter. And so probably much of this information will come from Roman sources. And that's why we need the Carols of the world, because they are the ones who can tell us what it all means. The idea of the Celts with their developed agriculture, and the statement made here is in deference to your textbook rather than in any particular sense of certainty, this degree of civilization. If you say, that's a little murky, what do you mean? Not much, because there is no sense of literacy or organized towns and cities. But it's an interesting possibility that Celts did have some sort of civilization, pre-civilization, before Romans. With that said, on to those Romans. Now, this is a before and after shot. This is the before. The Roman Republic, and you say, yeah, it looks good. It's a nice color. You say, but what about all the rest? Oh, we're getting there, we're getting there. I just want you to see Gaul, though, because I know just the mention of the word Gaul will bring back, second year Latin. By then, you know all your declensions and conjugations, and you're entering a brave new world, if I may say so. And then you meet Julius Caesar for the first time. And what a joy that is. You're thinking, golly, I mean, you know, there isn't a Latin teacher in the world, I think, who's not really pro-Roman Empire, because I just never heard any such praise of a human as one hears in the Gallic Wars. And this campaign for Gaul, as you can see, uniting, as the purpose was, Rome's successes in northern Italy and Spain would bring them into contact with Britain. I always like to remind people, as much as we might think of Britain as so important, that as far as the Romans concerned, this was an outpost of the world, just way out there and not even connected to the continent. There he is in all of his glory, and being so, shall we say, self-assured that he could write about himself, which I think is very strong, in the third person, which I think takes a lot of ego, and he had that. And during his campaigns in Gaul, because that was a long one that he spent there, I mean, he knew that he had some time left. He didn't know how little, but he he knew he had to do something big, and he did it. The conquest of Gaul, which he describes in glorious detail, which I imagine brought a lot of pleasure in many, many homes. You probably didn't want to stop. Sir?
Expeditions to Britain in 54 and 54.
50, I'm sorry. That's a typo, 55 and 54, I'm sorry. He went once and had to go back, and then he tried it again. In neither one, 55 or 54, though we describe those campaigns, was he, I suppose, in a position to pursue these in any major form. So he turned around and left. He made a few friends, so like, you know, the Peel approach, how to win friends and influence people. He made some allies there, and he said, now y'all, we're fighting a big war in Gaul against some of your fellow Celts, and we really need for you all to stay out. And if you do, Rome's going to be your friend. It's that kind of attitude, and they're going, yeah, that sounds nice. He said, and I have a special pen. It's going to be, and it says on it in Latin, little buddy, and that's what you're going to be. See, you're going to be our special friend. So apparently, old Julius Caesar had some allies among the Celts. And the campaign went on, as you see, until 50. When he got home, he must have felt very good about himself. He had conquered Gaul. He had gone to Britain. That may have been an excuse. I went to Britain. I subdued the Celts. I made the Celts Roman friends. But I'm not sure at that point that they were sufficiently aware of any particular resources that Britain had to make it worth, what would you call it, that capital investment, and that investment in military forces for that matter. In any event, one of the great might-have-beens of history, because he goes home, and we've all read the Shakespearean play, so we know that he met his end, and I suppose he never regretted, the least of his concerns was regretting the failure to complete the British conquest. I guess he thought about it sometime, but he had a lot on his plate, and this was not in the top priorities, shall we call it? So that is that. But I'm not through with the Gallic Wars. That is the Latin II saga. We learn about chariots, which I think is kind of interesting to know that they were not used by the Romans until they were adapted. And we know also more about what we call client states, and that's my little buddy routine. By having client states, y'all can be free, y'all independent, yeah, we respect you lots, and you're going to be our friend, now aren't you? And it's that kind of thing. Yeah, you're a state, but you're a pro-Roman state. And of course, some of them are not going to agree. I mean, those Celts fought among themselves, so of course they're all not going to go, yeah, we want to be on the Roman side. No, it's not that way. That'd make it a lot easier, wouldn't it? But they fought among each other, and some of them may have been pro-Roman. The significance here is that there was probably trade between Celts and the Romans after Julius Caesar. So there was a connection of sorts. But the Romans, I dare say, had lots of other priorities. I just hate for people to think, the Romans can't think of anything else, or they're obsessed by Britain. I mean, I'm an Anglophile. I think about it a lot. Okay? But I just don't think the Romans were that concerned. There were just so many other things. I mean, think Egypt here, folks. Think Egypt. I mean, they were very interested in Egypt. So, now, for you, and in translation, because I could have done this for extra credit, Carol. You could have done this. But this is actually from Caesar, and I just thought this was kind of interesting. The Kent part, Kent as in Canterbury, that part, say that's the most civilized, and I think that's his way of putting the rest of them down. But the most civilized of them live in Kent, which is entirely a maritime district. And then he goes on, he says, they do not sow corn. And you know that translation is actually referring to grain, so I won't insult you that way. But it says, but they don't sow it, but they live on milk and flesh and are clad with skins. And again, as I say, this is like a Jesuit in Africa or Asia, because you would just hear, all of them dye themselves with a bluish color and have a terrible appearance in fight. I think that'd be scary. They wear their hair long and have every part of their body shaved except their head and upper lip. 10 and even 12 have wives common to them. Goodness. Yeah, that's really confusing. And particularly brothers and parents among their children. But if there be any issue by these wives, they are reputed to be the children of those by whom respectively each was first espoused when a virgin. So there's lots of confusion, and I hope somebody could keep. They don't have any record keeping. I don't know. You're thinking, I guess they all knew about these things, but this is Julius Caesar's explanation of some of the more interesting and quaint customs of the British Celts. One always thinks of Margaret Mead in Samoa or something of the sort. I mean, it's just Julius Caesar as archaeologist or anthropologist among the British Celts. Well, as you know, between the death of Caesar and the actual invasion of Britain by the Romans, there would be a lot of interesting events going on in Rome. Need I mention Caligula? And so there is a lot of excitement, too much so for anyone to do anything about the campaign. As a result, the commencement of the campaign, or the recommencement, should I say, waited for Claudius. Now, many of you may remember the wonderful television series based on the Robert Graves novels. Absolutely. Whoever played the part of Livia was one of my favorite actresses of all time. What a meanie boy. Claudius was a sometime historian, quite the scholar, who really shouldn't have been emperor at all, except Caligula had some problems, some issues, and he needed to die. So Uncle Claudius then became the ruler. Why now? Well, according to some gossipy historians back in that day, it was because of the fact that Claudius, being a historian, not much of a military man, needed to do something that would make him appear worthy of being Roman emperor. As a result, then, the launching of this campaign. It was not that they were unaware of Britain. I think I have already pointed out to you that there was trade between the Romans and some of the Celtic troops in Britain. So, tribes, I should say. So that's not the issue at all. But the issue is, you've had your kingdoms, we've been patient, and now's the time for you to get on board. We're growing, we're great. Don't you want to be part of the greater Roman? We're doing good things for people. It's good to be part of Rome. It's that kind of thing. There's a momentum here. You need to be part of it. Get on the bandwagon. All of that. But even with whatever momentum there may have been, you'll note 18 years in the lowland. So it wasn't just riding through and everybody says, go Rome. They did struggle. They had to go from Claudius' time, and I might add, in case you've forgotten, Claudius was getting a little something extra in his beverage glasses by his niece, who also happened to be his wife. Now, you talk about lurid. Yes, this was dear Agrippina, who was waiting for her precious little boy Nero. And so Claudius wasn't feeling well during those times because of the beverages. And of course, when Nero did become ruler, the campaign was ongoing. So it's sort of like, regardless who the leader is, the campaign has a momentum almost all its own. So I won't bore you with the details of all the soap opera activities of the Roman emperor set, but I'll just let you know that it was going on, because even after the conquest of the lowlands, the more populated, the better climate, the more blessed area, I might say, no offense to those who love the north, it did appear they were far from complete in their efforts. You can see how far they got, which, if you want to go all the way to the second wall, will take you into modern-day Scotland. And some of you may have seen what remains of that Antonine Wall. We'll talk more about that. But Hadrian's Wall is the biggie, isn't it? That's the one that all of us tourists rush for, because that is one of the great significance. The names of the places there were the great cities of Roman Britain. And again, this is going to take time. Understand, we're talking both the first and the second centuries after Christ, while all this development is going on. So it is a big, big undertaking in terms of the development. And I'm sure, like many places where the British have gone in modern times, Americans and others, I'm sure they met with a lot of resistance. You know, even though the Romans are saying, someday you will thank us for all this. You know, we are bringing you into the modern world. And you turn around and ambush us. That's just rude. You know, and that kind of thing. People just, this is a problem sometimes in terms of empire building, right? So, again, just can't get enough maps, it would appear. But yes, it does seem that in so many of these places, the Romans are going to build their towns and cities, and more of that later. But some of them will be very familiar to you as places you've been yourselves, like York, up north, Leicester, Canterbury, and there's Exeter, and I thought that's a beautiful city on the shore. And all the way over, as you can see, into almost Wales. Now, somebody mentioned her to me outside, Queen Boudica. I looked it up, and that statue, which is along the Thames in London, was constructed in 1902. And I think, now, what was going on in 1902 that they would have wanted to honor a Celtic chieftain? I think it's probably because they wanted to praise the British. Look at us, aren't we great? And if you don't know her story, according to Roman sources, she was understandably enraged when the Romans abused her daughters and herself. And so, in protest, she and her people, the Iceni, actually rebelled against Roman authority. Why this is significant can be seen in a variety of ways. For example, having a woman leader really puts her on the map. And secondly, because I expect they were able to do quite a bit of pillaging and destroying, and I imagine some people, and those of you with military backgrounds will understand, I bet you some big heads fell as a result. You know, you get called in and say, what's going on? How could some bunch of Celts do this? You know, mess up our plans and destroy some of our fortifications. So that went on for several years until about 70. And she became a major figure, even though certainly not one who had been high on the list of people that the Romans would appreciate. Because by and large, there will be steps like this gentleman, Agricola, who will become one of the great builders of Rome. The years are his years in leadership in Britain. I decided to give you those years rather than birth and date because for our purposes they are more significant, because you can see yourselves we're still in the early stages, but not the very